Hello from London. Tonight we look at a new report claiming the existence of hate literature in 1/4 of Britain's mosques. Hello and welcome. Hate literature is alarmingly common in British mosques, according to a new report that comes out just as Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah visits the country. The investigation by Policy Exchange, a conservative think tank, claims that 1/4 of the mosques in the UK had material expressing hatred of women, gays, Jews, Christians and moderate Muslims, which has been distributed by, quote, agencies linked to the Saudi government. The controversial report has made headlines across Britain. Is Islam in Britain being hijacked by extremists? And what does this mean for Muslims living in the country? We take a look at the claims in the report on this show. And don't forget, we take your questions and comments, and the numbers are there on your screen. Joining me here in London to discuss the claims in the report are Dean Godson, Director of Research at Policy Exchange, the organisation responsible for the report on hate literature in UK mosques. Also with us is Inayat Banglawala, the Assistant Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us.
Good evening.
Dean Godson, if I could start with you, and I'm going to just read one of the quotes of one of the things you found in the literature. This was found at an Islamic school in West London. It says, "You will not find any confusion in which the Jews did not play a role. Their attempt at trying to immerse nations in vice and the spread of fornication. The Jews controlled this kind of trade and promoted it." That's one particular thing you found, and attacking Jews. What other sort of things did you find?
There's a broader pattern. Yes, there are many other attacks on Jews, but there are also attacks on Christians, all unbelievers in very sectarian terms, but most significantly perhaps the amount of opprobrium that is heaped upon those Muslims who do not come up to these particular Wahhabite puritanical notions of Islam as interpreted by either Saudi government ministries or indeed by the Saudi official religious establishment. There is a broad disgust for much of Western society of unbelievers, and there is a very strong pattern emerging which is urging believers of Islam as interpreted by these institutions to separate themselves from that host society, such as in Britain.
Well, we'll get on to what the implications are of those things you found, but I want to bring in Inayat Banglawala of the Muslim Council of Britain and say a couple of years ago you were appointed by the British Home Office as the convener of a working group on tackling extremism, and I figure this must be a fairly disturbing report. What have you made of it so far?
Riz, if you go into any bookshop, any Facebook shop, you will find material that will offend you. It is the nature of religions. They deal with the subject of heaven and hell, salvation and damnation. And often, if you are not part of that religious community, if you don't subscribe to its beliefs, you will find material in that will offend you. I can go into a Christian bookshop, evangelical Christian bookshop, right now, pick up a book which will describe the Prophet Muhammad as a paedophile. It is deeply offensive to me, just as offensive as the passage that Dean just recited just then. But there's nothing I can do because the law of the land in here allows you to make these offensive statements. If statements cross the line, if they incite violence, if they incite hatred, then let the people be prosecuted. Otherwise, there's lots of other hate material out there, and we have to tolerate it. We were taught during the Satanic Verses affair, you have to shut up and put up with it. Grow a thicker skin.
Well, let me quote what the Muslim Council of Britain said officially in refuting the claims made in the report. It says, "The report from Policy Exchange plumbs new depths in the ongoing and transparent attempts to try and delegitimise popular mainstream Islamic institutions in the UK and replace them with those who are subservient to neoconservative aims." Now, that suggests you feel there is an ulterior motive.
Well, yes. I mean, Policy Exchange have a history of trying to demonise mainstream Islamic institutions in this country. Remember, the leading lights in Policy Exchange are all neoconservatives. They supported the war against Iraq, which has been an utter disaster. They do not support the Muslim leadership in this country because they know it represents mainstream Muslims. What they want to happen in the UK is for the mainstream Muslim leadership to be replaced by subservient people, people who will not question a coming war on Iran, who will not question our policies in Iraq. That is their aim. It will, of course, completely fail.
Let me ask Mr. Godson, what you were looking for.
This is, first of all, we're not a neoconservative. Actually, I should put out, we're not conservative in the sense of being affiliated to any political party either. We're independent, which is why we work with people from the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, and Muslims of all backgrounds and all political affiliations. We don't accept the Muslim Council of Britain's self-estimation as the leadership of Britain's Muslims. Polls have found that only tiny percentages of British Muslims think that they are representative of themselves. We want to broaden the dialogue, and the point is here that we would have hoped that the Muslim Council of Britain would distance themselves from some of these very sectarian, very dark, puritanical views, which may be appropriate to Saudi Arabia at a particular phase in its development, but have no place in modern Britain, throwing homosexuals from mountaintops. I think also the other thing, it does need to be very firmly said in respect of what Inayat's saying, is that you cannot find comparable calls in any mainstream Christian, Jewish or Hindu places of worship in this country. If you go to the bookshop at Westminster Abbey, St Paul's Cathedral, I think Inayat would be very hard push to find contemporary publications by contemporary authors urging these very things.
So let me ask you one thing though. When you went to, sorry, Inayat, 1 second, if I could just ask that, did you go looking specifically for this kind of literature, or did you actually look at positive literature that's available in mosques?
Well, only in a quarter of mosques was this found. However, the problem is it's in Britain, some of Britain's most dynamic, best known and supposedly most prestigious Islamic institutions of learning. So 3/4 of them were found, when we looked through them, that they were not possessing such material on the premises. Now, what in some cases may be needed is that mosque leaderships need more help in cleansing the material from there. There has been insufficient rigour and vigour in, as it were, maintaining these holy zones free of this sort of sectarian material, and we want to kickstart a debate that will help them doing so. And I think Hazel Blair's made it quite clear today, the Labour cabinet minister with responsibility for communities and local government, that the response of the MCB leaves much to be desired.
Well, let me ask Inayat Banglawala, this, as you respond obviously to Dean Godson's statements here, let me also put an email to you we got from a viewer. This came from Arden Warner in Texas, and Arden Warner writes in saying, I'm always puzzled by the fact that Islam teaches that all infidels should be killed. Moderate Muslims will not disavow this teaching. I can only assume that all Muslims believe in and support the radical actions of Islamic terrorists. Now, this obviously has come from the US, where perhaps, you know, a lesser understanding of Islam is available to someone like this person. But I have to ask you, where is the moderate voice of Islam encountering this kind of thing?
Well, he said he didn't hear it. Well, let me make it clear. Islam absolutely forbids the wrongful killing of civilians. It is absolutely wrong to harm anyone who is not harming you. Of course, Islam gives you the right to defend yourself and your land and your property if you're being attacked. That is jihad, that you must have the right to defend yourself. Islam doesn't call upon you to turn the other cheek, but yes, of course, if you're attacked, you must defend yourself.
But it doesn't look very good to see the kind of statements that are being said, and what I'm asking is really, where is the moderate voice that says Islam is not about this, that Islam is trying to promote? I mean, admittedly, we say 25% of the mosques, but again, maybe the fact that many of them are high-profile ones.
Riz, what you didn't hear in Policy Exchange's report is what are the rest of the books that are being sold in these bookshops. Dean said 25% of the bookshops they looked into contain this kind of material. What was this percentage? Out of all the books they sold, how many contained this kind of hate material? That is what we didn't hear. The fact is, I've been visiting Islamic bookshops for 20 years. I've never come across the kind of material that Dean Godson and Policy Exchange cited in that report. I've never come across it. Where is it? It can only be there if you're deliberately going out to look for hate material. And if you're doing that, you'll find it in Jewish bookshops, you'll find it in Christian bookshops, you'll find it everywhere. And some of the books they were mentioning, you can purchase them from Waterstones. You can purchase them from mainstream British bookshops.
But in Waterstones, they don't have the sanctity of being part of an Islamic holy site. They therefore, Waterstones is not a site of authoritative Islamic instruction. Okay. And that's a very important difference. And actually, I do say once again, you can't find any evidence of this sort of thing in the Christian or mainstream Jewish places.
I'll get onto that in a sec. Let's get Ahmed on the line from London. Ahmed has a question or a comment. Ahmed, what would you like to ask or say?
Yes, I have a comment. It's basically about the Muslims' role in the West. I mean, at the end of the day, the West pretty much has a problem with the Quran itself, because the Quran makes quite explicit statements about various topics, and it's just the truth of the matter. Now, as Muslims, we believe in the Quran in its entirety, and it's true that we live in the Western world, but at the end of the day, every Muslim knows that it's not our final destination. I mean, at the end of the day, we are part of one nation.
Okay, so in terms of, you know, where we are going with this debate, let me ask Dean Godson, in terms of the way this report has been put forward, it's not really conducive to creating better harmony, creating some kind of dialogue. Perhaps the approach in how this information was put forward might have been more tactful to allow a better dialogue between the Muslim communities and the rest. The
lack of tact is coming from those who are saying the things. You know, I don't think there's anything very neoconservative about objecting to a particular interpretation, Wahhabite interpretation, that seeks to consign women to their particular view of a subordinate role, throwing homosexuals from mountaintops. And there are one or two calls to violent jihad as well, contrary to what Inayat said. If what he says is right, he's been turning a blind eye, a Nelsonian blind eye to what's going on in the mosque over many years, because I'm sure that you've seen many times, Inayat, Maududi and many of the other writings. It would indeed, it would be extraordinary if, including many of the mosques you know very well, that you had not found these, it in fact stretches belief that you haven't.
Well,
these are in Islamist terms.
If Dean Godwin just said he's come across literature which promotes violence, which incites violence, if that is true, give it to the police, because it is against the law to incite violence.
We have said that where people find it, they should be investigated and taken there.
Right.
But at the minimum, we have said, go ahead and look at it. Go ahead and investigate it.
Because you know there's no inciting of violence. Otherwise,
it says it in plain black and white in the literature. It says it. It's in plain black and white.
So why have the police not taken action?
We urge them. We say there must be. If the law has been broken, we state quite clearly it must be prosecuted. But at minimum, this is very undermining of social cohesion.
What is undermining of social cohesion is the repeated articles in the press by people like Dean Godson calling for war against Iraq. He's saying that these literature promote hate. Well, actually, the writings of Dean Godson, the writings of Charles Moore, the people of Policy Exchange have been promoting war, real war, in which real people have died, hundreds of thousands. Tell me that is offensive. Condemn that.
I condemn the killing of Iraqis.
Condemn the war in Iraq.
I'm delighted.
I mean, we're not debating the war in Iraq, so it's important here we don't get into a debate on what happens there.
Indeed, what's very interesting about the study is actually how little there is about the alleged shortcomings of Western foreign policy. It is principally about creating a degree of civilizational disgust with Western society. The kuffar, etc., is repeatedly denigrated over and over again, and people are urged, Muslims in the West are urged to withdraw themselves.
Does Jewish literature not condemn Goyim, the non-Jews? Does it not talk in derogatory terms about non-Jews?
There is nowhere in any mainstream Jewish institution have I ever seen, or Christian one, have I ever seen denigration comparable.
An important point, though, Mr. Godson, has this kind of research been conducted at the same level in any of the other religious institutions, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, or anywhere else?
We were approached by several groups of Muslims who expressed concern about what was appearing. This is, of course, we constantly hear from the Muslim Council of Britain and others that Islam is Britain's fastest growing, most dynamic religion. It is the one, as we all know, by virtue of being here on Al Jazeera, which makes many of the world's headlines. The Church of England, for example, as we all know, is in decline and has been losing membership and so on. So therefore, it is also, tragically, because of a small minority who have got certain ideas into their heads, it is the only religion today in Britain where people, in the name of a perversion of that religion, are actually killing their fellow citizens. So therefore, it is important to look at, nobody is killing anyone in the name of Anglicanism today in Britain. Now, as I say, that's a tiny minority. So that is why, but insignificantly, even in Northern Ireland, and the Northern Ireland analogy, nobody at the time, whatever their sectarian motivations, and 3,000 were killed, nobody did it in the name, the IRA weren't doing it in the name of Roman Catholicism.
People George Bush, who claims that he's inspired by God to engage in the war against Iraq.
Okay, let's stay off the war in Iraq for a second. Let's get Ibrahim on the line from London, who also has a comment. Ibrahim, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm calling from Germany. Hello?
Oh, Germany, I apologize. Keep going.
Okay, I would...
Go on. Ignore the echo. Just ask your question, please.
I mean, on the telephone. I would like to know,
well, that's
when
okay. Keep
Western
going.
countries are invading the Islamic countries,
we're going to have to leave your call, otherwise. Please ask your question.
Should be Islamic countries should be covered because they don't have any the defense treaties? Should Muslims give the flowers to the Western countries when they invade their countries?
Thank you. I mean, our caller obviously is talking about invasion of Muslim countries. I think it's sort of, it's referring to Iraq and so on. But if we look at the situation, going back to the report itself, what would you suggest, please, as the next steps?
Well, the next step should be, I mean, of course, we should not be happy that if hate literature is being distributed at mosques. And if it is, then we would urge all mosques to look at that literature and be responsible. I mean, we do not want Islam to have a bad name. However, we are very suspicious at the agenda behind policy exchange. The writer of this report, who has not been mentioned so far, is a chap called Dennis McKeown. Who is Dennis McKeown? Dennis McKeown writes regular letters to British newspapers praising Israel. Are we really going to be lectured to by someone on human rights and on tolerance by someone who is a hero worship of Israel? There is a clear agenda here, which is to demonize mainstream Muslim institutions. We will not accept that.
First of all, Dennis McKeown is asked here. I don't know what Dennis McKeown's...
He's the author of the report.
Yes, I know he's the author of the report, but he's been asked because he's a leading authority with over 35 years of experience.
And a leading apologist for Israel.
And a PhD in Islamic studies, contributed to the Islamic Encyclopedia, many other books. That's why I was asked to do, and because he's a first-rate translator. That is why he has been asked to look at the report.
Nothing to do with the support for Israel.
Of course not.
And has propaganda.
Gentlemen, just let me ask you for a moment.
We could care less about it.
Let's squeeze in a call. Gents, please. Let's squeeze in a call from Sarah in Dubai, please. Go ahead.
Yes, hello?
Hi, keep going, please.
Yes, hi. I wanted to say about... First, I wanted to comment about this whole report thing. Okay? First, I just wanted to make sure that... Hold on one second. Okay, first of all, I want to know, instead of focusing on the negatives and what differences we have and because personally I've read the Bible and I've read the King James Version of the Bible and I find it extremely offensive. It has incest in it and killings in it and murder, and I personally find it offensive. Okay, however, there are similarities in our religions, and why don't we just embrace the similarities and forget the differences and sit down in discussions of peace, as opposed to sitting there picking on, oh, this book said this and this.
All right, Sarah, thank you. I'm going to, because we have less than a minute, just 30 seconds each, Jen. Let's look at how we could at least create some sort of positive outcome from this. It's obviously creating divisions. So, Dean Godson first, what would you suggest as some positive engagement?
Well, I think it's good news to hear that Inyat wants to, is urging people to clean the mosques out, and those ones that are offensive. You know, this isn't anything to do with Qurans. This is to do with contemporary interpretations and publications being pumped out by the Saudi government and other Islamist groupings and foundations. That's what has to be taken care of. It's the contemporary stuff, and we need to start moving. Please, don't shoot the messenger. It is the actual publications that are the source of the disgust and the civilizational discontent.
Just 20 seconds. How would you suggest a better engagement, a better understanding of Islam, where these kind of misunderstandings won't?
I think it is really up to Islamic organizations to set a good example. We know in this country Islam is under a relentless attack by organizations like Policy Exchange. It is up to us to make sure we set a good example and not allow enemies to undermine the faith.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We've run out of time. Thank you very much for taking on this debate.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. On tomorrow's show, Brian Eno, the creative force behind groups like U2, the Talking Heads and Coldplay, talks about his political activism. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.